So tonight, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about what I call your God walk gauge. So what am I talking about when I refer to this? I'll get to that. As a relatively new Seventh-day Adventist, I consider it a type of rebirth. It's been a couple years for me now, but I can vividly remember my days of Sunday worship and, going and drinking beer with all the parishioners and watching the football game, right after service. Most of them overindulging, and this is a way of life oftentimes. And I was raised a Catholic, and that's certainly the way that they all lived around me. I've talked about pivotal moments in life in my testimony, but coming to Seventh-day Adventist was one of them. So when my walk changed from a few hours on Sunday to Sabbath observance, I started forming a relationship with God. I also started reading the Bible. I really didn't do that for most of my life and all the other religions I was in. Because the culture is listen to the man on the pulpit, absorb what he says, and then, ferment on that for a week, and that's going to protect you. So with this relationship with God, which the Bible ingrains in you, there came a different level of accountability for my own actions, and especially for my own thoughts. So what I started noticing in everyday situations, I automatically started having these flags go off. They were just quick flashes of unrecognizable caution or awareness. And I call that my walking with God gauge. And so when I refer to that, and I'm going to refer to it a few times on here, I'm referring to as you read the Bible and you participate in a relationship with God, He starts giving you these warning signs that pertain to everyday situations in life. And I'll give you one. So at where I work, everybody talks about getting out of work and going to the bar, having those drinks. On the weekends where they gather, the forced fun, I call it, the sanctioned functions that I always attend, there's lewd and crude behavior going on there. I don't share morals with these people. Therefore, I choose not to share time with them outside of work. We don't have those things in common. And up until I started gaining this God walk gauge, I would put myself in those situations. And so the Bible talks about putting on the armor of God. Is the armor of God really going to protect us in a fist fight? Is it going to stop a bullet when I'm on the battlefield? That's not the armor of God that we're referring to here. The armor of God that we're referring to is protecting your mind from the allures of this world, of the fleshly life. The armor of God protects us from temptation. It gives us those unrecognizable flashes and warnings that I'm talking about when I say the God walk gauge. For 20 years of my life, I led men into combat. That means I lived with them, I trained with them. But all these men had lives outside the military. They had wives and children. And so I lived vicariously through them as their leader. I was oftentimes involved in their personal life. And oftentimes it was not because I wanted to be, it was because it was my responsibility as a leader. And a lot of these situations were them getting in trouble. Drugs, alcohol, fights, domestic situations. And oftentimes, throughout my 20 years, I gleaned something. Oftentimes, all of these different incidences all stemmed from three things. And those three things are anger, envy, and the need of acceptance. And so that's what I'm going to talk about tonight briefly. And we're going to talk about what the Bible has to say. So in Ephesians 4:26 and 27, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down with your anger on you. But the important one here I'm going to focus on tonight is do not give the devil a foothold. So what am I talking about? Well, you all know what I'm talking about. You're running late for something, and this just happened to me the other day. And I know that I can make it if I don't have any unusual delays. But the first stoplight I come to, I look in and I see this new Tesla in front of me. And the person in the driver's seat, there's only one person in the car, is watching the news. I can see the news in their vehicle from my seat. So the light turns green. I wait a few seconds, then I honk. Then I honk again. And on my third honk, they look around. They were so enthralled in what was on that TV screen, they finally looked around and realized that noise pertained to them. That's how disconnected they were from the world. So they looked around, and then they panicked, and they were getting ready to go. Well, now the light's yellow. So they don't go. Now, there was a time where at this point, I got steam coming out of my ears. My God walk gauge is pegged. I'm in the red. Because there was a time I felt the need to let that person know the mistake they just made and how dangerous it is for them to be watching TV while they're driving. But then, a peace came over me. And Proverbs 29:11 comes to mind. Fools give full vent to their rage, but the wise bring calm in the end. Now, I had to learn that lesson the hard way throughout life. But I didn't really ever learn it until I started walking with God. And that's only been a few years where I've really walked with God. Now that gauge starts coming down, my mind calms down, I don't think about it again. I used to carry some of that stuff with me too. Now you know the good angels are not filling your brain housing group with that trash, right? I mean, I'd bring it to work with me and I'd be like, oh, that person, I'd be mad. And then the first person that talked to me, I'm like, whoops, sorry, it's not you. Trust me, it's not you. I've been through that, but I don't go through that anymore. So when my God walk gauge gets pegged, I start thinking about Proverbs. I start thinking about all of the Bible verses God refers to in anger. And it calms me down. So what about envy? Envy is a secret, very corrosive, degenerative, evil thing that lies beneath the surface. And oftentimes your outward actions and behaviors don't even show it. Because because it's common for people to put on personas that are not exactly them. So it eats at you slowly and consistently until eventually it's going to manifest and it shows in the outward state. So James 3:16 states, "For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice." I'll get back to that. So in fact, envy or jealousy can be so strong, Proverbs 27:4 declares, "Wrath is cruel, anger is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?" That's how powerful jealousy is and how it can root into so many other things. In fact, envy and jealousy can be the root of both of the other topics I'm talking about tonight. Sometimes at work, I reflect on, how much more money I could make, or I did make, when I was selling insurance, business to business. And I think about these agents rolling around these $100,000 whips, because that's the environment I was in when I was doing it. I was good at it. And it's not very intensive work. And I started thinking, I could have more things. I could improve my appearance to the public in every way. I could get a new car, a really nice car. I could put new siding on the house. I could get a dune buggy for those weekend long-range excursions that I can't afford to go on now. My God watch gauge starts bouncing. I'm getting excited here. There goes my God watch gauge. But then I remember how a lot of the money is made. Because in that business, at least in the business I was in the crowd I was in, we played on the desperateness of people, sometimes emotions, certainly using fake social norms to enhance sales. For example, grandparents insurance, right? You don't really need it. But we had this sales pitch that was ginned up by psychologists and professionals where we would make it sound like it's the norm and everybody's doing it, but they're spending this high dollar amount on this plan, and I don't recommend that for you, but just so you can fit in, I got this plan for you. And it would work like a charm all the time. But is that moral? No. Is that a manufactured statistic? Yes, absolutely. But that's part of the business. That's a part of the business that in my walk with God now, I don't want to be around. I can't be a part of that anymore. And so I think about where I'm at now. And then I think about the people that I don't even know, that I help every day now. I help them get insurance coverage for those surgeries that they desperately need. And that the red tape has caused delays or, in fact, even denials that shouldn't have been there. A lot of the things I do now constructively help people and their health. Now, the pay is not glamorous, but the reward is. See, God wants us to help one another. It feels good to help others. Now, I'm not saying all insurance agents are bad. Okay, we need insurance, and it's a reality, and there's a lot of great ones out there. I worked for a very aggressive company, and that is pretty prevalent throughout the industry. The Bible chronicles the power of envy in the story of Joseph out of Genesis. It tells how Israel made a robe of many colors for his favorite son, Joseph. But when the other brothers saw how Israel loved Joseph, the more that they hated him. Not because he stunk, not because he was weird, not because he was mean, but because he was getting something that they wanted and weren't. And that was Israel's loving attention. So as Joseph would share his dreams with the family, they would all blow him off. He would say, oh, you're all going to bow to me. I'm going to be a great ruler someday. And they would laugh at him. They would scoff. The brothers would mock him. But the father didn't. The father took note of it, asked questions about it. So when the brothers saw this, it really enraged them. It enraged them so much, in fact, that they plotted to kill him. And then at the moment they were going to kill him, one of the brothers, Reuben, said, no. He's our flesh and blood. Can't kill him. I got a better idea. Let's sell him. We can make some money. And then his blood's not on our hands. So that's what they did. Now, following on in that story, they regret that later on. And it's a great story. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage it. It starts around chapter 34 in Genesis. So we have the connection between jealousy and anger and how unchecked envy can create anger and hate. A cousin of envy is the need for acceptance. This too can drive behaviors and actions in the wrong direction. So what am I talking about when I say the need for acceptance? At the small end of the spectrum, I'm referring to, having to have Nikes because that's what everybody's wearing. And then moving up the spectrum, there's this growing acceptance in our society where lying and cheating and stealing is okay to get what you want. Like 50 Cent said, get rich or die trying, right? So this mentality has sunk into our society. And it's a poison. It's a true poison. And so then on the far end of the spectrum, I'm talking about inappropriate relations. I'm talking about drugs. I'm talking about violence and other behaviors that have become socially acceptable. In society, for a young person today, they can see these things. Now, it used to be in the movies, but nowadays, when I used to counsel young kids, they were telling me about things they would see on the bus that shocked me as an adult, that I don't think I've ever even seen. And this was happening on a middle school bus. So today's society is something that we as Christians need to put on our armor of God against. Now, Proverbs 13:20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise become wise, but those that keep the company of fools will suffer harm." I can vouch for that. I've had many lessons on this. But the one that comes to mind was when I was 15, I was hanging out with really cool kids. And my parents were forcibly encouraging me to go on a float trip that the church was sponsoring. So I asked a few of my friends to come with me, and of course they brought some booze. And they had this great idea. We were going to get inebriated and go on this river raft with my church. And so I didn't really want to do it. But I go to school with these kids. They're cool. We're cool. I was kind of the new kid, but I was in. So I did it. Well, we didn't make it far. Someone smelt it on the bus. We got kicked off the bus before it even left for the river. So that meant we had to call somebody's parents to pick us back up. And that's questions. Well, we found a way around that, but you get my point. I'm no stranger to this undue influence or falling, caving to it. So if at that time I had a relationship with God, if I had a good God-walk gauge at that time, it would have been pegged, and I would have been out of there. But I didn't. And once again, that was that armor of God that I didn't don. It's a decision. See, the brave take the path less traveled. That's a saying that the Marine Corps used to use back in the 90s for recruiting. There's a lot of truth to that. Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The transformation is important so we can discern what the will of God is. A good God-walk gauge can help with this. It can guide you. It is not our peers or society that should mold us into the image of who we are, but rather we should mold ourselves through free, clear, conscious thought in the image of an obedient servant of Christ. These pitfalls are part of the human condition. We are not able to rebuke the forces of this world, and we cannot prevent exposure to the temptations of the flesh. We can't resist them without endless strength. So that strength comes from the Father. The Father will provide it if it is sought and followed. So take time out of life occasionally and make sure that you're regularly checking and tuning your God walk gauge. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Wade. I would like to invite now special music. We don't have this often enough, but I love that we have this opportunity to listen.